South Africa has always been a land of rich landscapes, diverse cultures, and fascinating histories, but today it is becoming the focus of global attention for an entirely different reason: a groundbreaking invention in the automotive world that has left the industry stunned. A country often underestimated in terms of high-end technology and futuristic innovation has unveiled something that looks like it belongs in science fiction. A futuristic car that combines design, sustainability, intelligence, and independence in a way that has forced the world to stop and take notice. It is not merely a car but a statement, a symbol that innovation can thrive in places where people least expect it, and that South Africa is ready to redefine the global automotive narrative. The story of this car begins several years back when a small but ambitious group of engineers, designers, and researchers decided that Africa too could make its mark in the world of future mobility. While the world was watching giants like Tesla, BMW, and Mercedes push electric and autonomous vehicles to the front of conversations, this group worked quietly, almost in secrecy, building something that could rival the best. They faced challenges most people outside the continent cannot imagine: limited funding, unstable energy supplies, and little infrastructure to support large-scale innovation. But determination has a way of turning obstacles into opportunities, and out of those circumstances emerged the vision of a car that could overcome the very problems that held them back. When the car was finally revealed, the audience at the Cape Town launch event could hardly believe their eyes. The design looked like a blend between an art piece and a spaceship. It was sleek, aerodynamic, and sculpted in such a way that it seemed to slice through air even when standing still. Every line, every curve had been meticulously thought through, not only for aesthetics but also for performance. People whispered that it looked like something Elon Musk might want to send to Mars, but here it was, proudly South African, standing under the spotlights with a confidence of its own. The metallic finish reflected the lights in a spectrum of deep blues and silvers, giving the impression that the car was alive, breathing and ready to leap forward into the future. But the design, as stunning as it was not the only reason the car left jaws hanging. What truly shook the automotive experts was its energy system. At a time when the rest of the world is still grappling with the limitations of electric car batteries, long charging times, limited range, heavy dependence on lithium-ion cells, this South African invention offered something revolutionary. The battery system was built on a hybrid model that combined advanced storage technology with renewable energy harvesting. In practical terms, this meant the car could charge 4 times faster than a conventional electric vehicle, and once charged, it could last several times longer. Suddenly, the biggest weakness of EVs was turned into a strength, and it was coming from Africa. As if that wasn't enough, the inventors had integrated a fully autonomous driving system powered by artificial intelligence. The AI was not just a copy of what Tesla's Autopilot or Waymo had achieved, it was designed with Africa's roads in mind. That means it could handle unpredictability, unmarked roads, pedestrians suddenly crossing, wildlife appearing out of nowhere, and weather that changes quickly from clear skies to sudden downpours. The car was built with an array of 360-degree sensors, advanced radar, and machine learning algorithms that adapted to each new environment as the journey progressed. In test drives, journalists noted that the car anticipated dangers faster than any human could, braking at exactly the right moment, adjusting its lane smoothly, and even communicating with the driver through subtle visual cues on the holographic dashboard. Safety was no longer an afterthought. It was woven into the very DNA of the vehicle. But perhaps the most groundbreaking feature, the one that made the audience stand and applaud, was its independence from the power grid. South Africa, like many places across the continent, has long suffered from energy shortages and rolling blackouts. The engineers behind this invention knew that building an electric car that depended entirely on charging stations would be impractical. Their answer was elegant and radical. They embedded solar harvesting panels directly into the body of the car, panels so efficient they could recharge the vehicle while it was parked under the sun or even while it was driving. The car essentially became its own charging station. Road trips in remote areas no longer had to end in fear of an empty battery. This car could feed itself. It was a model of resilience, tailor-made for the environment from which it was born, and yet universally valuable. When the unveiling happened in Cape Town, the atmosphere was electric. The crowd, filled with reporters, investors, car enthusiasts, and government officials, held its breath as the shimmering silhouette of the car rolled onto the stage. For a moment there was silence, as though everyone was trying to process whether what they were seeing was real. Then the applause erupted, echoing through the hall. The lead inventor stepped forward, a man with years of quiet struggle and ambition reflected in his eyes, and declared, "This is not just South Africa's car.
This is Africa's future."
His words sparked thunderous applause, and in that instant, the car was no longer just a machine, it was a beacon of possibility. Test drives that followed the launch left people speechless. Sitting inside felt less like being in a traditional car and more like stepping into the future. The interior was alive with holograms, interactive displays, and a voice-activated AI that responded instantly. There were no cluttered rows of buttons or dials. Everything was clean, minimal, futuristic. If a driver wanted to adjust the climate, all it took was a word. If they needed directions, the holographic navigation appeared floating in the air in front of them. The system could even read the driver's stress levels through biometric sensors in the seat and steering wheel. If the driver seemed tense, soft ambient music would fill the cabin, and the seat's built-in massage function would activate to help calm them down. It was not just transportation, it was an experience designed to nurture the human inside it. The media exploded with coverage. CNN called it Africa's Tesla, while BBC described it as a turning point for global innovation. Al Jazeera reported it as a proud moment for the continent, and social media buzzed with hashtags like #FutureFromAfrica, #SouthAfricanCar, and #DrivingTomorrow. Videos of the launch went viral on TikTok and YouTube, and comments from around the world poured in, with people expressing both amazement and curiosity. Could Africa really have leapfrogged the world in automotive innovation? Was this the dawn of a new era where technological revolutions would no longer be confined to Silicon Valley, Berlin, or Tokyo, but would rise from Cape Town, Johannesburg, and beyond? Investors certainly thought so. Within days of the launch, interest poured in from across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Venture capitalists wanted a stake, automobile companies wanted partnerships, and governments wanted to know how they could get this technology on their roads. But the inventors stood firm. They announced that while international collaboration would be considered, the first priority was to make the car accessible to South Africans themselves. It was about pride, about proving that their country could lead in something so advanced, and about making sure ordinary citizens felt the benefits of the innovation. This was not merely about profit, it was about rewriting history. The environmental community also celebrated the invention. With climate change threatening every corner of the planet, here was a vehicle that promised zero emissions, renewable independence, and sustainability built into every part of its design. Unlike cars that still depended on mining-intensive batteries or fossil fuel-based grids, this South African car showed that vehicles could be both luxurious and truly green. Government officials hinted at tax incentives, policy support, and even a national rollout plan to integrate the technology into public transport systems. For once, South Africa was not just catching up with the world, it was leading it. And that was just the beginning. The inventors hinted at other prototypes already in development, vehicles that would take this technology even further. They spoke of trucks that could power entire villages, buses that could serve as mobile solar plants, and even emergency vehicles that could operate in disaster zones without ever needing to refuel. If the first car was a shock, the future they envisioned was a revolution waiting to unfold. In a single moment, South Africa had shown the world that innovation does not belong to a handful of nations. Talent, creativity, and vision exist everywhere, and when nurtured, they can shine brighter than anyone expects. The futuristic car was more than a machine. It was a story of resilience, of dreams realized against the odds, and of a continent ready to claim its place in shaping tomorrow. The excitement around the South African car invention did not fade after the launch. In fact, it grew louder each day, spreading like wildfire across continents. Social media platforms were flooded with short clips of the car gliding effortlessly through the streets of Cape Town. People marveled not just at the sleekness of its design, but at the promise it carried. In a world increasingly worried about energy crises, pollution, and the limits of traditional automotive engineering, here was a bold declaration that solutions could come from unexpected places. The fact that this happened in South Africa made the story even more compelling. It wasn't only about the car, it was about changing perceptions, breaking stereotypes, and showing that innovation had no borders. The inventors, a diverse team of young and experienced minds, became overnight celebrities. Their faces were featured on magazine covers, and television interviews broadcast their voices across the world. They spoke passionately about their journey, recounting sleepless nights spent in small labs, makeshift testing grounds, and endless rounds of trial and error. They told stories of how funding often dried up midway, forcing them to improvise with limited resources. One of them admitted that at one point, they had nearly given up when a critical prototype failed. But what kept them going was the belief that Africa deserved to create technology, not just import it. They wanted to inspire a generation of young Africans to dream big, to think beyond limitations, and to believe that the continent could lead in fields often dominated by foreign powers. The car itself became a symbol of this determination. During demonstration runs, journalists were invited to sit inside and experience the ride. Their reactions were priceless: wide-eyed amazement as the car accelerated with silent power, laughter of disbelief when the autopilot navigated through complex urban traffic without hesitation, and awe when the solar panels unfolded subtly across its surface, sipping energy directly from the sun. Some journalists joked that the car felt more intelligent than they were, always one step ahead, predicting moves before they realized what was happening. One described the experience as riding inside the future, and the phrase stuck, circulating across media headlines. As the story spread, comparisons with Tesla became inevitable. Was this Africa's Tesla? Was it better, or at least unique enough to stand beside the American giant? Analysts debated furiously. Some argued that Tesla had the advantage of global infrastructure, years of production, and Elon Musk's star power. Others countered that what South Africa had built addressed problems Tesla had not solved, such as independence from charging stations and adaptability to challenging environments. Unlike Tesla's sleek highways of California, Africa's roads were unpredictable, and this car had been designed to thrive in such conditions. It was not just competing, it was innovating in a space the giants had overlooked. International car companies began to feel the pressure. Rumors circulated that major brands were scrambling to analyze the South African prototype. Engineers from Europe and Asia were reportedly requesting blueprints, trying to understand how the solar integration and advanced hybrid battery system worked. Some companies reached out discreetly, offering to buy the patents or acquire the startup altogether. But the inventors refused. They stated clearly that selling out was not an option. Their mission was not only to revolutionize cars, but to prove that Africa could stand tall in global innovation. At home, the people of South Africa responded with immense pride. Newspapers carried headlines celebrating the African dream machine. Parents pointed to the inventors as role models for their children, saying, "If they can do this, so can you." Universities began inviting the team for guest lectures, and classrooms buzzed with new excitement about science, engineering, and technology. Enrollment in technical fields started to rise, as young people felt inspired to be part of the next wave of inventions. For many, the car was not just a vehicle, it was hope, a symbol that possibility lay within their reach. Of course, challenges were still ahead. Mass production was no small task, and scaling such advanced technology required infrastructure South Africa did not yet have. Critics raised concerns about costs, availability of rare materials, and whether the team could keep the car affordable for the average citizen. The inventors acknowledged these hurdles, but remained confident. They revealed that part of their design involved using locally available resources wherever possible. Instead of relying heavily on imported materials, they had engineered solutions that reduced dependency on foreign supply chains. For instance, the solar panel design used innovative composites that could be manufactured domestically. The batteries, though advanced, were designed with modular units that could be replaced or upgraded without the need for complete overhauls. Their strategy was to keep things simple enough for scalability, but advanced enough to compete globally. Investors, both local and international, continued to pour in offers. Some wanted to fund factories, others wanted to license technology. A few even suggested collaborations with European luxury brands to create co-branded versions of the car. Yet through all of this, the inventors maintained their vision. They wanted the first cars to roll out of a South African factory, built by South African hands, for South African roads. Only then would they expand outward. This stance earned them respect worldwide. It wasn't about greed, it was about integrity and identity. Meanwhile, the prototype continued to tour the country. From Johannesburg to Durban, it appeared in exhibitions, tech fairs, and even school campuses. Every time it appeared, crowds gathered in wonder, snapping photos and recording videos. Children ran their hands over its smooth body, marveling at how futuristic it felt. Elderly citizens looked at it with pride, saying they had never imagined seeing such a thing come out of their homeland. The government began to take notice too, with ministers attending demonstrations and promising to support the team in every way possible. Discussions began about tax incentives, infrastructure improvements, and even the creation of new policies to support renewable energy vehicles. The car had not only captured public imagination, but was beginning to influence national policy. International media returned again and again, each time uncovering new layers to the story. They highlighted how the car had been built not in lavish laboratories, but in modest facilities powered by sheer willpower. They showed the inventors' workshops where machines hummed and prototypes were tested tirelessly. Documentaries began to air, painting the picture of resilience, determination, and brilliance. The narrative was irresistible. A group of dreamers in Africa had built something that could reshape the world. It was not just about transportation anymore, it was about rewriting the global story of innovation. But what perhaps made the invention most powerful was how relatable it was to the African experience. In a continent where electricity could not always be relied on, where infrastructure was uneven, and where people often had to adapt to unpredictability, this car represented survival through innovation. It embodied the very spirit of making do with what you have and turning it into something extraordinary. That was why it resonated not just with South Africans, but with people across Africa. Many saw it as proof that their challenges could be turned into strengths, that necessity truly was the mother of invention. As weeks passed, the car's fame only grew. Universities abroad invited the team to present their invention. Technology conferences in Europe and Asia extended VIP invitations. At one event in Dubai, when the team drove the car onto the stage, the audience erupted in a standing ovation that lasted minutes. Reporters later wrote that it was one of the most emotional moments in recent tech history, watching a group of African innovators command such respect on a global stage. People were no longer asking whether Africa could innovate, they were asking what Africa would invent next. The inventors themselves remained humble. In interviews, they often redirected the attention back to their country and their people. They said the car was not the achievement of a few individuals, but the reflection of a nation's potential. They reminded audiences that Africa was full of untapped talent, waiting for opportunities to shine. Their message was clear: this was just the beginning, and the world had better be ready for what was to come. The wave of excitement surrounding the South African car invention had grown into a global movement. It was no longer just about one prototype or one team of inventors. It had become a symbol of what was possible when determination and creativity broke through the limits of expectation. In major cities around the world, discussions took place in boardrooms, universities, and policy circles. Could this invention signal a shift in where technological leadership would come from in the future? Could Africa, so often seen as a consumer of innovation, now stand as a producer and leader in the global market? These were the questions people asked as videos of the car streamed across millions of screens, captivating viewers everywhere. In South Africa itself, the invention ignited a cultural renaissance. For decades, young people had often looked abroad for role models in technology and innovation. They admired Silicon Valley startups, European laboratories, and Asian factories, imagining that progress was something that happened elsewhere. But now, they had a living example in their own backyard. Schools began organizing trips to view the prototype, and classrooms filled with discussions about renewable energy, artificial intelligence, and the power of invention. Teachers who once struggled to inspire their students now found themselves overwhelmed with questions. How did the solar panels work? Could anyone learn to build something like this? What subjects should they study to join such a movement? The car had awakened curiosity, and with it came a wave of ambition. The inventors recognized this influence and leaned into it. They began hosting open workshops, inviting students and young engineers to see their work up close. They believed knowledge should not be locked away but shared, so they opened their labs to visitors, explaining each part of the car, from the battery systems to the AI software. Children who visited left with eyes sparkling, carrying dreams of one day building something of their own. Parents wrote letters to the inventors, thanking them for showing their kids that greatness could be African too. It became more than just an invention, it became a movement of inspiration. Globally, the story sparked debates about the future of mobility. Experts in the United States and Europe admitted that the South African invention addressed problems their own markets had overlooked. One commentator pointed out that while Western companies designed cars for environments with perfect infrastructure, wide highways, and reliable power grids, the South African car had been created for a world where unpredictability was the norm. That meant it was tougher, smarter, and more resilient. It could thrive not only in Africa but in any part of the world where conditions were less than perfect. Suddenly, markets in Asia, South America, and even rural parts of developed countries became potential frontiers for this technology. The inventors, however, resisted the rush of commercialization. They were cautious, knowing that premature mass production could compromise quality. They wanted to refine their designs, to test the car in every environment possible. Reports emerged of the team taking the prototype on long journeys through deserts, forests, and mountainous terrain. They wanted to ensure that the car was not just a showpiece, but a truly functional machine ready for the real world. Journalists who accompanied them on these expeditions reported that the car performed astonishingly well, gliding through sandy tracks where traditional vehicles would struggle, powering itself in remote areas with nothing but sunlight, and adjusting to the rough conditions with its intelligent suspension and adaptive systems. The stories only added to the car's growing legend. As attention grew, governments outside Africa began to take the invention seriously. Delegations from Europe and Asia visited South Africa, eager to see the prototype firsthand. Some officials expressed interest in adopting the technology for their own sustainable transport projects. Others offered partnerships, proposing to share expertise and resources in exchange for access to the design. But the inventors remained firm in their stance. South Africa would be the heart of production, and the technology would remain rooted in African ownership. This insistence earned them respect across the continent, where too often resources and inventions have been extracted and exploited by outside powers. For once, Africa was not just contributing raw materials but leading with finished, world-class innovation. In the streets of South African cities, people began to talk of the car as though it were already part of everyday life. Taxi drivers wondered how long it would take before they could trade their old vehicles for one of these futuristic machines. Families dreamed about road trips where they would never again worry about fuel costs. Environmentalists spoke about how this invention could transform cities plagued with pollution into cleaner, greener spaces. For the ordinary citizen, the car represented more than technology. It represented a better life, a future where progress belonged to everyone. The inventors also began to think about the next steps. They spoke in interviews about plans to create an entire ecosystem around their invention. It was not enough to simply build cars. They wanted to build an industry. That meant training new engineers, creating local supply chains, and building factories that employed thousands of people. They envisioned research centers where young talent could develop even more groundbreaking ideas. They wanted to spark a domino effect, where one invention would inspire countless others, turning South Africa into a hub of technological excellence. They imagined a future where Africa was not just a participant but a leader in the global tech race. Meanwhile, international investors continued to circle, eager to secure a piece of the future. Some saw dollar signs, others saw an opportunity to be part of history. But the inventors carefully chose whom they would work with. They rejected deals that would strip them of control or move production out of Africa. Instead, they sought partnerships that aligned with their vision of empowerment and sustainability. This selective approach frustrated some potential backers, but earned admiration from those who respected their values. They were not willing to sacrifice their mission for profit, and that integrity became part of their brand. Back in Cape Town, where it had all begun, the prototype continued to draw crowds. Every time it appeared in public, it felt like a festival. People took photos, touched the smooth surfaces, and cheered as it drove past. Street vendors sold merchandise with images of the car printed on shirts and posters. Musicians wrote songs about it, and filmmakers began planning documentaries to capture the movement. It had transcended its role as a vehicle and become a cultural phenomenon. For many, it felt as though the entire nation was riding this wave of innovation together, united by pride and possibility. But with fame came scrutiny. Critics raised questions about scalability, affordability, and long-term durability. Could the car really be mass-produced without skyrocketing costs? Would ordinary South Africans be able to afford it, or would it remain a luxury item? The inventors answered patiently, explaining their phased approach. They planned to start with limited production, refine the process, and then gradually bring down costs as economies of scale kicked in. They admitted it would not be easy, but they were confident it was possible. They had, after all, already achieved what most people thought impossible. The car began to be seen as more than just an invention. It became a symbol of Africa's potential in the 21st century. People across the continent embraced it as their own, even if they were not South African. It was a victory for the idea that innovation could come from anywhere, that Africa was no longer content to be seen as lagging behind but was ready to stand at the forefront. The sense of pride spread across borders, creating a shared identity rooted in possibility. And as the months passed, the inventors continued to refine their vision. They spoke about creating not just cars but entire smart systems that would connect vehicles, homes, and cities in a sustainable network. They dreamed of an Africa where solar-powered cars drove through clean, green cities, where energy independence was a reality, and where innovation created opportunities for everyone. Their dream was big, almost audacious, but if the car had taught the world anything, it was that audacity could turn into reality with enough determination. The arrival of the South African futuristic car sparked conversations in almost every corner of the world. Industry leaders who once underestimated Africa's role in technological development suddenly began paying attention. The car itself was not just an automobile but a statement, a bold declaration that South Africa could stand tall among global innovators. Crowds gathered in large numbers during exhibitions, pointing at the sleek curves, whispering about the advanced electric motor, and marveling at the futuristic dashboard filled with touch-sensitive panels and holographic projections. For many, it was the first time they had witnessed a vehicle that seemed to come directly out of science fiction films, and yet it was real, created by engineers who poured their passion into making something extraordinary. The buzz reached major car companies in Europe, Asia, and North America. Executives studied the South African invention carefully, searching for weaknesses or flaws, but what they found instead was a marvel of simplicity combined with brilliance. It was not overloaded with unnecessary complexity. Instead, every part of the vehicle served a clear purpose. The aerodynamic design reduced drag to an impressive level, increasing efficiency far beyond traditional standards. The battery system, designed for long distances, used locally developed technology to extend life cycles and reduce dependence on rare imported materials. This alone gave the car a unique advantage in sustainability, a factor increasingly critical in the 21st century. International journalists flew into Johannesburg and Cape Town to cover the story. Headlines read like something out of a dream: Africa's answer to Tesla, the futuristic car that could change everything, and South Africa sets a new standard in auto tech. Local citizens felt a new kind of pride, realizing that innovation did not have to come from Silicon Valley, Germany, or Japan. It could come from their own soil. The inventors were invited to television programs, podcasts, and global summits, where they spoke with humility about their vision to make transportation smarter, greener, and more accessible to everyone. The futuristic car was not only about technology but also about culture and identity. Its design incorporated elements inspired by South Africa's rich heritage, blending modern engineering with subtle artistic patterns that reflected African creativity. The vehicle's interior featured eco-friendly materials sourced from local communities, turning it into more than just a machine. It became a symbol of empowerment and connection to the land. For young South Africans, seeing such innovation rise from their own country was nothing short of motivational. Students at universities began dreaming bigger, discussing possibilities of joining the automotive revolution that had just begun in their homeland. As the hype grew, international investors showed great interest. Meetings were arranged with global venture capitalists, automotive giants, and government leaders who wanted to be part of the revolution. Yet, the inventors remained cautious. They knew that rapid commercialization could lead to exploitation or loss of control over their vision. Their dream was not merely to sell cars but to ignite a new movement in sustainable transport. With each passing week, new updates about the car spread across social media. Videos of the vehicle silently gliding through busy streets, accelerating faster than traditional cars, and showcasing its self-driving capabilities went viral, drawing millions of views. Critics, however, were not silent. Some argued that the invention was too ambitious for Africa, claiming that the infrastructure was not ready for futuristic vehicles. Others raised concerns about affordability, asking whether ordinary citizens would ever be able to buy such an advanced product. The inventors listened to every criticism, taking notes and ensuring that improvements would be made in future versions. They believed challenges were simply stepping stones toward perfection, and with determination, they worked tirelessly day and night to address every obstacle. In the end, the South African futuristic car was more than an invention. It was a turning point in history. It showed the world that innovation does not belong to any single country, that brilliance can rise from anywhere when vision, determination, and courage come together. What began as a dream in the minds of a small group of inventors grew into a global movement, inspiring not only the people of South Africa but millions across continents who believed they had nothing to contribute to the world of technology. The car stood as a symbol of hope, carrying with it the spirit of resilience that had always defined the South African people. Each curve of its design told a story of creativity, each spark of its motor carried the promise of a greener tomorrow, and each mile it traveled reminded the world that Africa's future was not to be underestimated but celebrated. As the first models rolled out of production and found their way into the hands of eager drivers, the streets of Johannesburg and Cape Town lit up with excitement. Children pointed with wide eyes, elders smiled with pride, and dreamers across the globe saw proof that the impossible could be achieved. And while the world marveled at this invention, South Africa quietly prepared for the next chapter, knowing this was only the beginning of a much larger journey.